Let's talk about the US presidential election and how the parties are choosing their candidates. The incumbent, President Donald Trump, has had his challengers, but no real threats. He's always looked like the shoo-in for the Republican nomination. Different story for the Democrats. They started with a record 28 candidates and have been working their way down to just one, the one who's going to take on Trump. The US system for choosing presidential candidates is unlike anything else in the world. It's messy and convoluted, and not everyone thinks it's fair. So how does someone get to run for the most powerful job in the world? You'd think that America, a place that's often held up as a beacon of democracy, would have a pretty straightforward system to nominate who runs for president. Not even close. If you're American and a member of either the Republican or Democratic Party, you don't actually get to directly pick the nominee at the national party conventions in July and August. Your vote is used to guide a person known as a pledged delegate, and it's their job to represent the will of the party faithful at the convention. They're elected in what's known as primaries or caucuses.
If you ask people what's the difference between a primary and a caucus, unless they live in states like New Hampshire and Iowa, they have no idea.
A multi-million-dollar marathon of smiles, waves, speeches, and handshakes, which somehow contrives to put into office the leader of the world's richest nation.
Most states hold primaries. They can be open to the public or restricted to just party members, or a bit of both. People at primaries cast secret ballots for a delegate who they trust to vote for their preferred candidate. But 3 states hold caucuses. They're basically informal meetings in places like libraries or even living rooms. People argue in favor of their preferred candidate, and then they hold a public vote.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Primaries and caucuses go on for months, and different states have different rules. Republicans and Democrats organize them differently too. But this year, the only real contest is who will stand for the Democrats. So let's focus on how they do it. The Iowa caucus is up first, followed by these states, and then Super Tuesday, when 14 states all vote on the same day. The U.S. Virgin Islands are the last to vote for the Democrats right before their national convention in July.
I think by Super Tuesday in most elections, you pretty much know who the nominee is going to be. So states that vote late after Super Tuesday, for example, really have no say in who the nominee is going to be.
Winning early ensures that you're able to generate the revenue that you need to campaign hard in these later primary states. It also gives you I think, an air of electability because it's shown that you're a winner and people like winners.
It's what they call the momentum effect. It happened with Trump and other presidents too. And momentum can build as early as that first caucus in Iowa.
I'm fired up.
Iowa has turned underdogs like Jimmy Carter and Barack Obama into winners.
But taking Iowa, like Pete Buttigieg did this year, doesn't guarantee you the nomination, because this isn't just a popularity contest. It's also a numbers game. Bear with me here. At the Democratic Party convention in July, there are almost 4,000 spots for delegates, and a candidate needs a simple majority to win. Simple so far, right? But each state is allocated a different number of delegates. For instance, California gets 415, New Hampshire gets 24. And those numbers are decided using a formula that may include how many people live in the state and how often they voted Democrat. But stay with me. There's another formula. This one's at the state level, and it's used to work out how those delegates are divided up between each of the candidates. It's as complicated as it sounds. In fact, the way that votes are added up can lead to some pretty confusing results, like what happened in New Hampshire.
This victory here is the beginning of the end for Donald Trump.
This year, Bernie Sanders won the popular vote in New Hampshire by more than 3,500 ballots. But because of the way votes were calculated, Pete Buttigieg actually got the same number of delegates. It was a similar story in Iowa. And it's all because of those formulas.
State parties have tried to weigh the allocation of delegates to even it out between the less populated rural areas and the more populated urban areas.
So Bernie Sanders' support is very high among young people. He could win a lot of votes around major university areas or bigger city areas, but he's missing these sort of smaller spaces where Pete Buttigieg is able to pick up.
To get any delegates, the candidate needs at least 15% of the vote at a caucus or a primary. If they fall short of that threshold, they're out of the race. The ones left standing get to go to the party convention. A candidate needs a simple majority of delegate votes to win the party nomination. But if there's no clear winner, then we're into a second round. And that's when the superdelegates step in. Unlike pledge delegates who are elected, superdelegates are senior party members who get an automatic invite.
These superdelegates are basically party officials, people high up within the machinery of the party in each individual state, and they also go to the convention just because it's a great big party and everybody wants to go.
This year, there are almost 800 of them. And unlike the pledge delegates, superdelegates can vote for anyone they want. So they don't necessarily reflect the party's grassroots. And that bugs some people.
In the United States, where we like the mantra of one person, one vote, essentially what we have allowed to happen is that one elite has the power of 10 votes or 100 votes, depending on who they are and where they are.
They want to be more thoughtful and holistic about how they run this process. But I think there's still a lot of work to be done on how this process is organized and also how this process is made intelligible to the general public.
After the conventions wrap up, the Democrats and the Republicans will each have their presidential candidate. For the Democrats in particular, this whole process is more than just picking a candidate. It's about deciding the party's future direction.
There's obviously a side, the Sanders-Warren wing, who wants to go in directions that are pretty radical for the United States. There's a more moderate wing that wants to sort of stay a little bit closer to the center because they think that's the only way that they're going to end up winning the general election.
And that's the ultimate goal, winning the presidency. But that process isn't straightforward either. When the November election comes around, people will be casting ballots for members of something called the Electoral College. And those people choose the next president of the United States. That's a whole other episode. If there's a story or a topic in the news that you want to get your head around, send us your ideas in the comments section wherever you're watching this video. I promise we read them all. I'll see you next week for another episode of Start Here.